Space-related professions are coming, that's for sure. What jobs will be out there, we don't really know yet. But Nicolas Gaume has a pretty good idea where the industry is going. Entrepreneur, space fanboy, Nicolas' passion and talent is to create enterprises, which he has done since his early 20s. Nicolas, here's the first question to you. At the very beginning of your career, what did you study?
I stopped right after high school. So I really stopped studying when I was 18. I initially felt I could go into a business study, but I didn't really went too deep into it. Then I looked into computing and computer technology and development. But soon enough, I felt compelled to create my first startup. And that's really what took over and ended my let's say, my studying world and my studying years.
Okay, awesome. So you said that you created your first enterprise. How old were you?
Close to 19, so 18 years and some month. That was my first venture.
And what did you found?
So I grew up in the I was born in the 70s. I grew up in the 80s, and I really was fortunate. My dad was a geek. He was a chef. I mean, his real job was he was a chef in a hotel and restaurant, which I'm lucky to own with my family today. But besides being a chef, he was also a computer geek, and he bought one of the very first computer from Apple, an Apple II. And I started programming when I was 7 or 8. And, that was kind of obvious because at the time computers were simpler and you couldn't use them without some form of programming, which I loved. So eventually I started coding more complex things. I was fortunate to have because I was a teenager, I guess gaming was a big part of my life. And I was fortunate to create a game that was purchased by a computer magazine to distribute. And that means that I meant that I could connect the dots between my passion and some form of revenue. So it grew on me, and I was moving forward to becoming a more avid gamer and looking at what opportunities there were. And I really felt that gaming, which was pretty much a niche market at the time, my belief was it would become a very big market. In that instance, it was really quite true. I also felt that Macintosh and Windows would become the dominant home computing system, which at the time in the late 80s wasn't really the case at all. Macintosh was a very expensive machine. Windows was a very non-effective OS for PC machines. So it was really not a safe bet, but we really believed in that. And that was requiring a way of developing and coding very different from other games. So really by specializing on these machines, we acquired a knowledge. Along the line, we also felt that 3D imagery, a real-time 3D image would be the norm for gaming, which was also a good bet. So with all that, we kind of invented the way of making games, which was very unique. And that's how I started by being creative with very little money. We started doing work for hire for an existing game company in the US, in Europe. And when I was 21, Apple, who took notice of our existence from the very first days, felt we were very exciting and decided to invest in the company, which was obviously a moment where we became even more real. And that really started my days as an entrepreneur, truly. And that was when I was 21. And then, stories came along. I sold my game company to a British group, British media group named Pearson when I was 24. That brought me a significant amount of wealth as an individual. And in all fairness, looking at that money, I started thinking, do I spend it? Do I have fun? Eventually I felt the best way to use these funds was to start another company. And that's really when I realized that I was more of an entrepreneur than anything else. And just to tell you a little bit of my second company, so I was still running my game company, so it was technically a parallel company, but I was very European. I grew up in Europe studying, Latin, Greek, European history, and at the time I read a book that kind of was showcasing what China was and was telling about Asia and China particularly. It was in the mid-90s, and because I had some money, I said I'm going to take a month to visit China, which I did. And my hometown of Bordeaux in the south of France is a sister city with Wuhan. a city that everybody knows now. And I actually went from Wuhan all across the country and discovered China from within, which was an amazing experience as China was literally opening up at the time. And I felt, thinking about what I could be doing in China because I wanted to be back and do things in China. I started thinking I'm going to do video games, but there were really no computer at all in China at the time. That has changed since then.
Yes, tremendously.
But there was one kid per family, a growing concern from parents for their education, not a lot of educational materials available because with Cultural Revolution in China, a lot of the publishing world was diminished. At the same time, I had a lot of book publishers and children book publishers coming to my game company to make apps of their properties. So I started buying book rights, feeling that I could become a children book publisher in China. I tell you that story because probably we're going to talk about space and other things I did. But the reality is I became a children book publisher for children in China without knowing anything about China, nor anything about children book publishing, no publishing for that matter. And nevertheless, with that bold bet, with a lot of enthusiasm, and to quote Mark Twain, not knowing it was impossible, well, we did it and sold over 1 million books in a matter of a few years before selling the company to one of our Chinese distributor. And that gave me a lot of amazing experience in China, going into the core of the education, edutainment experience that China was looking for. So, and with these two experiences, continuing my game company, I started investing in other companies and ended up doing 9 startups for the past now 30 years. So that has been what I've done so far. So no studies.
Incredible. So you saved some time. Instead of studying, you created companies, yes, which is amazing, and getting your experience on the go and successfully, which is incredible.
Well, success, I think is very relative. I had a lot of success. I had a lot of failures too, and probably had more failures than success. I think it's what matters, I guess, is what you learn and what you do, and hopefully what you provide people who trust you with, whether customers or investors or team employees. And I think that's what I learned over the years.
Before we get to space, how do you define success?
Let's say impact. Maybe success is impact when you bring something to someone. So when you build a company, you're going to really impact customers. I started in video games, and I remember my first trip to the US. I was again a young adult, and I went to San Francisco, went to a mall, and there was this gaming store which I entered, and there was a 5 or 6 people amassed around a gaming machine, and they were laughing and having fun. And so I got curious, and I say, "Wow, what are they doing? What games are they playing?" And then I put my head, and it was my game, made in Europe, made in France, made in Bordeaux, thousands of kilometers away from there. And so that was really a successful moment in the sense that if I could, create something with a bunch of amazing people that would move or in that particular instance, entertain people, that was a successful moment. And, along the line of with my team, what we built, what we learned, the experience we lived, the journey we went on, that was also an amazing success, even though there were really tough moments. And eventually that particular first company had ups and downs. That was probably successful moments that long last in our memories.
Excellent. So from games to space, what was the path?
So it has to be, first of all, that we're all geeks. So I guess it's the ability to see in technology the best usage and certainly make the path from innovation and technology to actually impact and again pushing boundaries. I told you the story about China because it was also finding a path in the middle of impossibility or out of the box. And I feel that games also provided me with this notion that you can start all over again and try again. I mean, in games you have a feeling of virtuosity. And I played a lot of games when I was young, and I tend to believe that it gave me the idea that when we try and try again, you can actually eventually succeed. So, and you have multiple lives in games. I guess even though I had some failures, I continued. I just to give you general sense, when I started my game company, I wasn't really wealthy. Started with a technically 4,500 euros, but which was a huge amount of money when you're 18, right? But then that got me to become a millionaire. At 27, I floated this company. I became a billionaire.
Wow.
Cover of Wall Street Journal, in the media everywhere. And then the bubble burst in 2000 and the company went under, and it was horrible. And I mean, I had some tough moments in my life as an entrepreneur, and I had to restructure and lay off people. It goes with a job, and it's not the easiest part, but that's some time taken. But in any event, I think it's interesting to go into places nobody has gone before. And space is certainly an interesting area, but the same way web was, the digital world was in the 90s, or video games were in the 80s. I think it's interesting because it's a lot of possibilities, a lot of interesting dynamic at plays, and a lot of desire. At the end of the day, it's really down to what is the impact, what is the use, how it's going to empower people to do things or have different experiences. And, growing old, I started in video games when I was a teenager, when I started my first company. Certainly as I move forward in life, I wanted to have things with, greater impact, with an ability to change people's life. And I think that what we saw with Emmanuel Etchepart, my co-founder in space, was a unique opportunity to bring very high value product back to Earth that would be designed in ways you just couldn't actually activate anywhere on Earth. So that's the uniqueness of the space environment, to manufacture high value product, that got us excited. And we decided to focus on the specifics of life science, just again, because it has most impact. I think that what got us to start the process was all these amazing entrepreneurs, are building vehicles and infrastructure, and you can thrive on an infrastructure. I mean, I think it's Jeff Bezos who said that he couldn't have built Amazon without having the telco infrastructure, the internet infrastructure that was existed in the US and worldwide, with the Visa card for payments, with FedEx for delivery. And because there was all these things, he could build Amazon. I guess it's the same trajectory for Space Cargo, I hope, which is to leverage all these ships and platforms being created by the space agencies and these amazing entrepreneurs, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, and try to build something that would really bring value back on Earth, which is what we're rooted for.
It's very important what you say about infrastructure and having the right environment to thrive your own company, and it's also very inclusive, which I like particularly.
Well, I'm glad you call it out, because that's a super critical component of our values.
Yeah, I can see that. And so the company is called Space Cargo.
Yes.
And so you were talking about products, making actually products based on the experience that you do in outer space, and then bring it back to Earth in order then to use them on Earth. And what kind of products are these?
So there's a variety of usage. So when we created Space Cargo, really the intent was to actually set an environment where we would be able to work in a variety of fields. Now, let's be specific on what fields are. Manufacturing is one of them. There's things you can manufacture without gravity, with very little gravity, that are quite difficult to build otherwise. In the field of composite new materials, there's a cable called Zipline that has been experimented upon in the US by a variety of companies, including a company made in space that work on the International Space Station with 3D printers, and they build that cable that is much more conductive, made in space than made on Earth. Same manufacturing principle, but when made in space, actually much more effective. What we as a company focused on was life science and more specifically agriculture. Reason being is that we felt that was obviously something meaningful to everyone. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the first basis of human life. You need to feed yourself. And if you look at the ways that the climate change is impacting agriculture, it's drastic. We're going to have more and more lack of fresh water. And that is a severe consequence, also increase of certain disease among the agricultural world. So we really felt there was opportunity, and I'll tell you specifically why, but that's what we're focusing on. And really the main reason when you recreate Earth on a space craft like the International Space Station, you recreate all the parameters of life. Everything from temperature to pressure to humidity, every oxygen levels. This is really well set up, and it's actually organized in such a way that everything should be like on Earth. But there's one thing you can't recreate at this stage, or it's not recreated on the International Space Station as it is, it's gravity. And that makes a huge amount of difference. Reason being, gravity is the only, and when I mean the only, I mean really the only parameter of life, main parameter of life, that has never evolved since life exists on Earth. All the others change. They were like centuries of some level of temperature, and then others with higher temperature, lower temperature, humidity, pressure, even brightness. I mean, what killed the dinosaurs is likely a darkness of dust that created a species. So the gravity, kind of by being the only parameter that never evolved, became the cornerstone, the backbone of life. And so when you remove it, like you do on the space station, while recreating all the others, you create a stress that is immense on anything living. Most things die, by the way. I mean, if you don't exercise as human, you're going to have severe consequence. If you put a plant in the middle of the ISS, it's going to drown into its own water because there's no convection. So that's very severe. And so we teamed up with a number of research laboratories, namely the FAU Erlangen University near Nuremberg in Germany, with specifically Professor Michael Lebert, who's our chief scientist officer, and the ISVV, which is Institut des Sciences de la Vigne et du Vin, which is a wine lab. And I'll get back to the wine side, in University of Bordeaux, in the southwest of France. And we teamed up with them because we wanted to have the best of knowledge on research on space. And Professor Lebert brought this immense knowledge of him and his team on the matter, along with the specific topic of viticulture, because we felt that if we were to start on agriculture, we needed to start with we can likely call the canary in the coal mine, viticulture. Viticulture, vine plants are super sensitive to climate change, and they're affected. So that was a good start. Vine leads to wine, and the wine industry in Bordeaux is obviously big, but it's also actually quite successful as an agricultural product. And it's really bringing, therefore, a significant amount of funds that really is funding research. And really the ISVV, this wine lab, could not exist anywhere else than Bordeaux, and we could grasp a very amazing lab facility with amazing researcher. And this is the combination we leverage upon to create this first research program in space, on agriculture and viticulture for Earth. Obviously, everything we'll learn in viticulture will apply to other agricultural segment. And one of the key things we've been doing is exposing plants at a certain stage of development to the space environment that would create natural evolution, as nature would try to cope with this particular environment, that will give specific characteristic to the plants, modified as such. So when they come back on Earth, because they survive this amazing stress of the absence of gravity, would become much more resilient to lesser stresses, namely the one related to climate change.
Well, it's flabbergasting. I'm impressed.
Well, that's very kind. But so basically, we're space botanists. So, we're botanists. Like, the truth is, most evolution agriculture, I mean, there's a lot of fruits or plants that's been done with botanists by, selecting the more resilient species and trying to adjust and cultivate the one that were most effective. So it's really not, it's totally the opposite of I don't know, GMO, I'm sorry, genetically modified. So in GMO, humans decide to change specifically genetics of plants. In our case, we really do the opposite. We expose the plants to stress and see how they cope with it, and select the one that nature has shown as more resistant.
Okay, I see. When did you found the company, Space Cargo? When did it start?
So it started in 2014. And it took a lot of time. There's a lot of really complexity in building a space program, particularly when you start a project from scratch. So it took a few years for us to get back, and also we really wanted to find this holistic view. I mean, usually people any research program is one experiment. We designed 6, which goes from the vine to the wine, and we wanted to make sure that every component of the research was touched, and so therefore we could learn most. Most of the research, not all, but most of the research is done with the best science culture. We really also wanted to find a very pragmatic outcome, really be grounded into actual meaningful, impactful results for Earth. So that was also super important. And finally, we wanted to find ways to really look at ways to fund the program. And that's really challenging because space is very expensive. And even though we were very, very, very fortunate to be supported by the amazing science program and research program support from international agencies, there's still a lot of investment to be done. So with all that, we set ourselves with quite a few challenges. Sending plants is always a challenge because you have a limited slot before the plants die. So you need to send them at a certain moment in time when you harvest them, send them and bring them back. And that was kind of a bit of a challenge. We managed to fit in the right time frame, and we retrieved 320 vine plants we aged on the space station, and they were in dormant stage, exposed to the absence of gravity for 10 months. Mm-hmm. And we replanted them this late winter. We grew them, and they are really bringing all the satisfactory results we were hoping for. The ground control plant and the space plant behave quite differently. The space plant grow much faster than the ground control. They also have a different cellular structure. And we started doing some tests exposing these plants to mildew, which is a disease that is really the plague for many agricultural topics. And the plants are much more resilient, and it's already a promising need. Now, it takes a little time to get to anything sure. So we still have a huge amount of work on this particular experiment, and we probably will send other plants back on the International Space Station to continue that particular research. We also sent bottled wines, which was very interesting because wine is this multi-component liquid with key components like bacteria, yeast, sugar, polyphenol, and we really wanted to see the overall interaction of these in space. Then it took a lot of energy to get this one done because alcohol is forbidden on the International Space Station, as well as bottles of glass, so anything in glass containers. So it took us a lot of energy to really get this going, but we're fortunate to get there and eventually have very interesting outcome, and we'll do some research publication on the wine itself later on. It's also a way to fund the research because we're selling actually one of the space wine bottle to fund the outcome of the follow or other research. So it's also creative ways of trying to fund a research program, which is always a challenge in any research program.
Of course.
Even further on space.
Have you been on the ISS yourself?
No, it's very complicated with the ISS. Only 8 private citizens have gone. But no, it's really reserved for very trained astronauts and skilled professionals. Now that's going to change, and it's a good segue into my other project. And I guess you cleverly set it up that way. But so I haven't done 2021 is year one of space, private space flight, a commercial space flight. Space Cargo will continue its journey, continuing this research program. We're working hard to find positive outcome, but it's a research program. So we may find things, we may not find things. We'll continue, and we're going to work hard. We will continue to publish and share most of our discovery. And one of the hope that we have is really to grow naturally some specific plant that will be more resilient to the stresses of climate change. And we hope that we'll be able to accomplish this in the coming years. Now, visiting a lot of spaceport with this particular project, I actually realized that it was in a way shocking disconnect between the very ambitious commercial space flight, bringing traveling to space to private individuals at a certain price. At this very moment, it costs a lot of money to go to space. It's millions. of dollars, and that's not unfortunately yet for everyone. It will, I believe so. It will, but at this very moment, it's for very wealthy individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, it's shocking to see that in most spaceport where these flights will take off from, there's very little infrastructure. Very little infrastructure to host pure hospitality, and more importantly, very little, let's say, focus on a proper training. So don't get me wrong, there's a lot of training available, training that will give you the technical training, but nothing that will be holistic, that will give you the best of not only the technical, but also the mental preparation, as much as all of this into let's say, a hospitality level at the highest that these very wealthy individuals would expect. Most of the spaceport have very, very, standard hospitality infrastructure. So we felt there was a way that we could possibly create a space training complex that would actually have the ambition to create the best of the training as much as the best of the hospitality combined. And so when I say we, actually, this is myself and an amazing space entrepreneur named Jason Andrews, who's done a number of amazing companies in the US in the space sector. And him and I got together because I lived in Seattle, and we had some common friends, and I tried to work with Jason into Space Cargo Limited, but didn't work out. But nevertheless, we became friends and decided to entertain a few ideas. And this one came as an obvious opportunity. And we created this company called Orbite, O-R-B-I-T, Orbite. And Orbite's mission is to really bring this amazing need, or fulfill this amazing need of best training and best hospitality combined. So we're going to unveil this summer the location of the first training complex will open in 2024 in the United States. And in the meantime, we're going to start what we call orientation program, which are a number of sessions we're going to do in Europe and in the US into existing hospitality complex nearby some space facility, to start giving anybody interested in space a 3 days, 4 night overview of what exists out there, get them to connect with professionals from space, look at what the vehicle's experience could be, how you feed yourself in space, how you're going to actually experience space. And we'll do 0G flights, you feel what it is to be floating in space, high G flight also, what it is to get 4 or 5G, and see what it is by yourself, holistically, effectively, and the best level of mental preparation, best level of hospitality experience. So we are starting this very end of the summer first session the week of August the 23rd in France, in my hotel in Arcachon. It's not only because it's my hotel, but it's actually close to where ESA astronaut train in Bordeaux. There's this 0G flight named Novespace. So we have booked a flight to open up. And then we have a number of amazing guests and speakers will come, including people from CNES, which is based in Toulouse nearby, to discuss the French and the European Space Agency. And the other one is going to be at the Four Seasons in Orlando, because it's close to Cape Canaveral. And we have a number also of speakers and amenities that will allow us to again, give our guests this full picture of what is a space travel.
So you are probably in some of the best position to say where the space industry is going, and what do you think that the near future new professions will be? Because this is, of course, a podcast for people who want to find the job of their lives, who want to change job, who definitely are looking into professions, and new ones, old ones. This is definitely a brand new field. What do you think the first new professions in the business of space will be?
First of all, you have to appreciate how ambitious the NASA and Chinese space agencies are in funding these defining infrastructure. I believe that the European Space Agency and other agencies are also going to raise their ambition moving forward. And there's definitely a significant amount of opportunities raising. But, it starts by really reinventing all the fundamentals of the infrastructure related. In other words, when you're going to be flying into space, a lot of things that you would take for granted on Earth are challenged. The way you feed yourself, the logistics, the overall preparation. So I think that in many, many cases, existing jobs will be reinvented in all the spectrum of how you manufacture the infrastructure itself. So a lot of jobs in aerospace, probably very jobs that are not new, but that are applied to amazing new frontiers and fields. So I would there was, interestingly enough, cycles in engineering work on how much space was recruiting. In the years of Apollo program, there was a lot of jobs, and then space shuttle there were, and then after the end of the space shuttle programs, it was much less jobs. And so I actually know a lot of space engineering trained in space who went to other fields. So there's definitely, I believe, a ton of opportunities in the short term for space engineers. And moving forward, it's going to be all the infrastructure. So, as a doctor or as a nurse, how do you prepare for a space journey? And is there new techniques and new abilities? Agriculture also, how do you feed people living in space or going to space? And that applies to logistics, telecommunication. How do you communicate on the moon between space and Earth? So that's going to be creating a new generation of opportunities for a lot of existing jobs. And that's probably, I guess, the things at this stage, which is, and as moving further down the line, I think it's going to be much more precise. I know that SpaceX, for instance, I was talking about the Medical Corp, published a job description to recruit a doctor or medical staff that would be willing to go with the astronauts and private space flight opportunities they will provide to go to the moon and Mars. And they want to have a doctor to set up the programs and start building this infrastructure. So that's unique opportunities coming along. And the NASA budget has been voted last week, I believe, and it's very significant. So I think at least for the decade to come, between what's the US are spending and China is spending, it's going to be a very interesting dynamic, like probably when there was the Russian and the American competition over space that will create many opportunities. Now, as Elon Musk, as Jeff Bezos, as Richard Branson, as other private investors continue to succeed building services on top of these infrastructure, they will create new jobs. What Space Cargo Unlimited aims to create is again, a new field for biology and research on agriculture. We will probably do other projects along the line, which also will require new specialists, and Orbite, by preparing the space flight, to also create new opportunities. In hospitality, you take École Hôtelière de Lausanne in Lausanne in Switzerland, which is one of the best schools to train hospitality executive and personnel. Well, maybe they will be working on the specifics of space-related travel. So that's really very much the new paradigm shift.
Yeah. Great. I have the feeling that we need a couple of different podcast interviews in order to cover the whole amount of things you do. And but I want to thank you so much for this interview. It's very inspiring and it's very interesting. And I wish you all the best, because there are a lot of things that are in development. There are lots of startups, and I'm sure these are not the last startups that you will create. I'm sure, and I hope to one day meet you in person as well.
It'd be a great pleasure, absolute pleasure.
I like how Nicolas defines success. It's about impact and what you bring to someone. Listen to more episodes on Job Tales Laura.